I recently rewatched Band of Brothers, a series that was created about the 101st Airborne Division from their days in training through being dropped behind German lines on D-Day and their battle step by step towards the end of the Nazi regime. The drama, the interviews about Easy Company and their stories journaled their journey as young men, literally from training as Americans and moving to England and flying and getting dropped as they were taking on fire, and many of them losing their lives even in those initial drops. I watched in amazement as this story played out. Their acts of heroism, their bravery, the fear that was so well captured. It was an amazing story of real men who were 16, 17, oldest, I think, maybe early 20s, as they were part of what is now called the greatest generation, as these young men were forced. They didn't all just volunteer, but they were forced into what they were doing. It was a sense of heroism, of sacrifice. Some of the battle scenes were just gripping, and they had the real life survivor interviews that were taken in and out of this whole series. And some of these men now in their 80s, they were catching them before they passed away, literally in tears, about the friends that they had lost and not knowing why they survived, and telling stories about being involved in World War II. And while I don't in any way put down or belittle the achievements of our men and women in uniform now, I do think about the contrast between the two generations. And I know those who have served, those who are serving courageously, many of them are my friends. So I'm in no way saying that they're the easy life versus hard life, whatever. But I contrast two generations. A generation whose parents in World War II, parents had just come out of World War I, whose great-grandparents likely were alive during the Civil War. It was a different era between then and now. And I take a look at the contrast of what I call the greatest generation. Many have called it. Tom Brokaw wrote a book called The Greatest Generation. And what I like to call the selfie generation. Contrasting two generations of Americans, and those of you who are listening around the world, my buddies in Uganda, by the way, hello. Wish you guys well. I can't wait to come see you someday. But as we take a look at just American society, I take a look at the contrast between those generations. One, a generation being hardcore, and largely this generation soft. Generation being blue collar. In fact, the middle class had really not started to evolve until after World War II. And our generation, which is even our poor, are wealthier than 80% of the world's population, who lives on $2.15 a day, by the way. That's the international poverty line. Only 1% of Americans live below that line. Kids who grew up, on the one hand, in the greatest generation, playing stickball in the streets and experiencing real discipline at school, and actually being able to not pass a grade in school and having to get held back or failing or whatever. Kids who got spanked. That was my generation, by the way, Gen X. We got spanked. Versus generation now that is just soft, coddled. Even our middle class has so much stuff that we just become soft. Even disciplined parenting versus what's called gentle parenting. Creating love and boundaries versus, on the one hand, with discipline versus having no respect and growing young snowflakes. Accountability on one hand and being held accountable for actions from the greatest generation, to holding space and assuring of self-worth and all of that love and comfort and safety absolutely should be provided to a young child, especially young girls, young boys, babies. But isn't parenting a bridge between that helplessness and getting out into the real world, where real threats are there, where real accountability needs to be held, where real failure exists? And yet we live in a generation that is so coddled, so soft, never has to experience anything wrong, anything bad, and parents who are getting in the way versus a generation that grew up and eventually was able to end fascism. I wonder if we could fight such a world war now. Not sure. Hope we don't have to find out. Hope we don't have to find out. Were there problems in the greatest generation? Absolutely. Was there alcoholism, domestic abuse, violence, racism? You bet. So I'm not saying painting some whitewash look at that generation. Instead, just kind of drawing the contrast between the types of men who were involved in those generations versus the types of men we see today. My grandparents, definitely my parents' generation, were part of a lot of those isms: racism, alcoholism, sexism, all of those things. But I'm drawn to the stories of easy company in the greatest generation, those who lived for something greater. And as I sat back on my couch after watching these episodes of Band of Brothers, I thought, man, what a contrast in the generation and the kind of men that were part of that. And that brings us to our topic today. Welcome to the next stage. I'm Rob Stout. I'm your host. I'm so excited to be working on this podcast with a group of people who are together working to produce something for you to help you as a man summit life's climb. We're in a series called The School of Hard Knocks. And if you start back in episodes 7 and 8, it's School of Hard Knocks 101 and 201. We took a look at the reality of just hard knocks in our life and that they are part of life and we need to get used to it. But how do we learn through those things? In episode 8, we looked at the hardest things in life, the things that just rip your guts out and what you do with those things. And in the last episode, we took a look at practically what are some of the things you can do when you're in the middle of that to help crawl out. I want to welcome you to episode 10, which is the School of Hard Knocks 401, Overcoming Entitlement. I hope you're up for this. This was not fun to necessarily write and prep for because I had to look internally at my life, but we're going to talk about entitlement because it is something, if not captured, if not grabbed onto, can paralyze you, can become a disease in your life. And we're going to talk about it just like that, kind of a medical diagnosis. The big framing idea that I want to hang this episode on is this, that entitlement is a disease of myopia. Myopia is being nearsighted. When all you can see is you, all you have is you, and your world gets very small. Entitlement is myopic living. And when all you can see is you. All you have is you, and your world gets really, really, really small. It's like if you ever experienced a blackout, your world just goes, whoo, man, and it gets really small, really narrow, and then bam, you hit the floor. I had a friend of mine, my buddy Bart, did that, collapsed at altitude, and long story, but that's just what happened to him. But that's what myopic living does. It narrows you in. And I want to go back and contrast our lives now with the spirit that I saw in Band of Brothers. It was that hero inside of each one of us. So think about your life, man. Isn't there something in you that aspires to heroism in your life? Isn't there something in your gut that aspires to living a great life, to want to be the man in the battle, the man in the trenches who fights for something valiant and something true and something purposeful and something meaningful in your life? Touch that emotion as we enter into that. And it may not be on the beaches of Normandy. It may be those who are serving in our armed services around the world somewhere, and we thank you for your services. It may be those of you who are police officers on our streets. It may be somebody in an office who's thinking, man, how do we construct this business proposition so that we can go after this market? How do we take a look at this data so that we can capture that market segment? That's hero energy as well. It may be you as a dad going, man, my kid's going through this. How do I help them navigate this? How do I show up big in their life? It may be you in a relationship where things are hard. Things were once great and you fell in love and maybe you got married and all of that, but now you are facing something you didn't know was coming. Welcome to marriage, by the way. And you've got to walk through it and you've got to press into it. And there's something in you that wants to rise to that occasion. I want to appeal to that side of you. There's something in the soul of every man that cries out, be the hero. Be the hero. There's something in you that is buried deeply. It is innate in the male psyche. It is primal. And it says, show up when it matters. Think of you when you were a little boy. Like any other little boy, I'm sure maybe you had toy guns in the house. Maybe your parents were like, we're not having toy guns in the house. No guns for us. So what'd you do? You found a stick and you broke it and you made a gun, right? Maybe they're like, no weapons in the house. What'd you do? You found a broom handle. You unscrewed it, and you had a sword fight, right? That's just the way little boys are. You can't take that out of them. In fact, that energy needs to be harnessed and focused in good ways. Otherwise, it is going to explode or implode, but it's got to be burnt. It's got to be fueled. Think about the movies that we watch. They're all about the hero. Old movies like Spartacus, one of my favorites, Rocky. What about Gladiator or Band of Brothers, the series, or Braveheart? They are stories about heroes who rise to the occasion. And man, that is a lot about what we're talking about in this podcast, about appealing to that part of you, that power side of you, to be able to harness that and take that and use that for good in your world. But there is a problem that stands in the way. And we got into that in our introduction. There's a problem that stands in the way, and that is the problem of entitlement. It's the problem that entitlement is a disease of myopia. When all you can see is you, all you have is you, and your world gets really, really small. Definition of entitlement. It is the belief that one inherently deserves or is privileged for special treatment. It is the belief that inherently deserving and you're privileged to have special treatment is just the opposite of something being earned. Heroes in any of these movies that we talked about, Gladiator, Braveheart, Spartacus, you name it. The heroes worked for something that they were not entitled to. They had to earn it. The entitled man believes that he inherently deserves something. He should be given something. He deserves it. Why? Because deep down inside, the entitled man believes he is better than those around him. Maybe by his name, maybe by his education level, maybe by his family pedigree, maybe by the money that he has, maybe by his good looks, maybe by deep insecurity that says, I've got to show up bigger so that I'm accepted. I'm not sure what fuels that if you're this guy, but I want to talk to you if you're Mr. Entitlement. The reality is that the entitled man has several characteristics about it, all of which are life-taking. Here's the problem. Entitled men are takers, not givers. Entitled men are selfish, not selfless. Entitled men are life-sucking, not life-giving. And entitled men are indulgent, not sacrificial. Does that describe you if you really, really look at it close? Are you a taker? Are you selfish? Are you a life sucker? Are you indulgent? Here's the problem with entitlement. Eventually, it leads you to a place where you can't even see it. It's like a disease that you're totally blind to. Ask somebody close to you who's not going to be your yes man. Am I this way? Honestly, am I? Hopefully, they've got the guts to give you the truth. But the result of living that way, the problem as it grows itself out in your life, is that entitled men drain the life out of people, out of organizations, out of families, out of economies, even out of countries and civilizations. Entitled men take, they're selfish, they're life-sucking, they're indulgent, and what that does is drain the life out of those around them in small levels and in bigger levels. Think about it. As a man begins to be a parasite, let's just say, that sucks the life out of the host, think about it. The economy, a big macro view of this would be the economy in the United States. When I wrote my book, Getting Even, Countering Life's Hard Knocks, little selfless plug, I did a look at the debt in the United States. It was at $15 trillion. I couldn't believe that was a number that was just mind-boggling. It is 10 years later now. On the date that we're recording this episode, the U.S. is in debt $35 trillion. That is by a generation of people, both sides of the aisle, by the way, red, blue, green, I don't care what the color is, that says we can just take and take and take, and who cares? We are life-sucking, and eventually that leads to a dead end. It just does mathematically. Think about the divorce rate in our country. Many, including in my family, are divorced. But at a divorce rate of over 50% across any demographic, well over 50%, wouldn't you think that the message of self is the thing that could be destroying half of the people who say we're committed forever? Look at teachers. I'm married to one, okay? I've got a wife who is a teacher who is overwhelmed by parents coming in with their little boy, Bobby, and saying to her, Mrs. Stout, Bobby is so special. Bobby's so special. We need him to get in the Gifted or Talented program. And you know what my wife can't say? Your kid is one of the stupidest kids I've ever seen in my life. Perhaps one of the most entitled. If he would learn to read and write, maybe he could make it out of second grade. But she can't say that because she's part of a school where feelings are so important. We live in a generation where everybody thinks they're special. I want to say, Bobby, you're special to your mom, but outside of that, that's about it. The reality that Of course, Bobby's special. Let's not mess with Bobby. He's special. He's loved by God and his parents. Okay, but outside of that, it gets to be a pretty small number pretty quick. But he thinks and grows up with the sense of being entitled to lots of stuff and lots of rewards and lots of trophies and even getting out of second grade without knowing how to read. It is overwhelming. How about on the personal household side of things? Do you know the personal household debt, and this is in the United States, is $18 trillion. In underdeveloped countries around the world, you might be listening to this and like, man, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's an unfathomable. But even in underdeveloped countries, power becomes the opiate. Even around the world where there may not be a lot of money, there's power, there's something that feeds the self. And God forbid that those in underdeveloped countries would get a hold of the internet and be able to see, because what it does is it feeds this thing of entitlement even in them and creates a chronic dissatisfaction. That's the problem. That's the problem with entitlement. It's a message that says, I deserve more. Do you know why I can talk about this? Because I feel entitled too. I grew up, I'm a Gen Xer. We didn't grow up with as much stuff. We didn't grow up with near as many accolades. There were winners and losers. But we played dangerous games in gym class. We played dodgeball. You get smacked in the face. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff going on at Gen X that now is, of course, not appropriate. Okay, but I live in the same culture too. I, at times, feel entitled to have things work out. I feel entitled that things go my way. I feel entitled that my wife responded in a way. I feel entitled that things will work out. I feel entitled to promotion. Guess what? I'm not entitled to jack, and neither are you. Man, what is at stake here? In case you don't have a sense of the urgency of this 401 School of Hard Knocks conquering entitlement topic. Man, what is at stake here is that entitlement is a disease of myopia, where all you can see is you. You have blinders on, and all you can see is you. All you have is you, and your world gets really small. Being all about you is a horrible existence. It creates ugly, detestable, lonely men. Those of you who love movies like I do, one of my favorites is Lord of the Rings. Remember Gollum in Lord of the Rings? His want, his precious, was the ring. Oh, he had to have it. He had to possess it. He had to get it. He had it for a while. He lost it. He wanted it. It consumed him. Remember Gollum? How ugly and just big eyes and scaly, real pale. He's goofy looking dude. The desire, the want of that ring, that it changed him physically. It changed him where he didn't look the same. He looked detestable. He was absolutely consumed. He lived with blinders on, that all he could see was that ring. All he wanted was that ring. And that's what entitlement does. It creates a small world where all you can see is you and all you have is you. I wonder sometimes in our culture, our children are growing up in this kind of culture. Our children are growing up around social media that presents them all these images of what they've got to look like, and all they think about is themselves. There are young women in our family who remain nameless, okay, who all you see is selfies and all this stuff. And I'm like, my goodness, what else does she do? Not daughter number 1, daughter number 2, or daughter number 3. Thank God they grew up before all this hit. But it was just this generation of growth. And I know of young women, teens and preteens, who, if they don't get enough likes, they feel really bad and their self-worth takes a hit. For real. I'm like, who cares? There's a whole generation of Sephora moms. Have you heard about this? Where they're taking their little girls to Sephora to pick up all kinds of makeup. And these little girls, 8, 9, 10, are not just playing dress up on occasion. It's how they roll. Why? Because some teen influencer who's selling product for Sephora is leading them to believe that they're not just good enough, just cute, just pretty as young girls. And it is creating a culture that has to be made up and has to look perfect and eventually starts to think only of themselves and eventually grows right in naturally to adult narcissists who are entitled to the perfect life. What's at stake, man, is pretty simple. It's a golem-like life that is grotesque and self-centered and blinded to only one thing, and that is self. Or there's another possibility. There's another possibility of living with cause, living with purpose, living with vision, living with calling, where we can live virtuous lives and show up big and heroic for others in our lives. We're going to jump into that, and we're going to do that in just a second. But before we do that, I want to tell you about an opportunity. It's out of the book that I mentioned earlier. I wrote a book called Getting Even, Countering Life's Hard Knocks. And the book is all about, it's a journey I took on this school of hard knocks. And I want to share it with you. I would love not just to nickel and dime you out of a couple bucks, but it's going to cost you a few dollars to get the book. But I would encourage you to get it. There's a workbook as you go through this. There's a plan that you construct through this. Listen to this, and we'll come right back as we take a look at the plan of walking through how to break entitlement in your life. Well, welcome back. So what do you do when facing the school of hard knocks? What do you do when facing this hard knock called entitlement? I want to give you a plan to unentitle your life. Again, not sure if that's a word. We're going to make one. It's kind of how language works. It evolves, that kind of thing. How to unentitle your life. Remember, if you are an entitled man, you are a taker versus a giver. You are a selfish man versus a selfless man. You are a life sucker versus being a life giver. And you are indulgent versus being sacrificial. To unentitle your life, you need to reverse course. This is hard because as things get hardwired into your brain, you develop muscle memory for living. And if you're used to living, especially if you have been raised this way, it is really hard to break, but you can do it. You can do it. I've seen men reverse course on any number of things. You can do this. Here it is. What you need to do is become a giver versus a taker. You need to become selfless versus selfish. You need to become a life giver versus a life sucker. And you need to become sacrificial versus indulgent. Remember, entitlement is the disease of myopia. When all you have is you, all you see is you, and you start to live really, really, really small. So the solution? Get a bigger vision for your life. Get a bigger vision for your life. If myopia is not being able to see distance because all you can see is things up close, develop a bigger vision. Get some vision correction. Go to the doctor, the Next Stage podcast, and let's work this thing out. Call me. Let's do some coaching around this. I would love to help you walk through this. Not as somebody accusing you and slapping you and punching you around, not at all, but just jumping in it with you and helping you walk through this. I want to tell you one way today to do just that. It's not a 7-stage plan. It's not a 20-step approach. You don't have to buy a course. In fact, this podcast, free, right? You're either watching it on YouTube, I hope so. You're listening to it on one of our audio channels. I don't know how you're getting this, but there's no complicated formula for this. It's not we discovered this secret that was never known to mankind or womankind, and we just want to give it to you. And just hang on, we gotta tease this out a little more, and you gotta just click below. No, I'm gonna give it to you. Do you know what the secret to living larger is? It's painful. It connects to a part of you that hurts so bad. Guess what it is? It's giving and serving. It's giving and serving. As I take a look at my life, the thing that most ties to what my level of interest is in my wallet. It's my credit card. It's my bank statement, old school checkbook, cash, whatever it is, Bitcoin. I don't care what it is that you've got. The way you direct your spending in your life is the direction that your heart is drawn. So let me walk you into giving generously. I do seriously believe that the step that you can take, and here's the thing about this. Perhaps you go to church. You've heard your pastor talk about this. You're like, oh man, he has a horse in the race. That dude, he gets his salary paid off this. You're not paying me jack in this. I am an unpaid endorser of this solution for entitlement. I guarantee you it works. Giving generously breaks the mold of selfishness. It breaks the mold of being a life sucker. It breaks the mold of indulgence. Why? Because it takes the most important thing that you hold dear. That is your money, no matter how much it is. If you're $2.15 underneath the international poverty line, if you're $200 million, it's a game of percentages. It's a game of heart. And I'm going to tell you how it works. The first thing you do to take a step in giving is to start with baby steps. Here's the key to it. It's got to be anonymous. It's got to be anonymous. Why? Because we know that those who give love to stand up at the charity event and be recognized as Rob Stout, big donor, right? Or Rob Stout with his name carved in the concrete with a brick on the wall, with his name on the page, with his logo on the bottom of the donors for this great thing. Give anonymously. Start with this. If this is your very first shot at giving anything to anybody, which I hope it's not, start with tipping 100% of the bill for the restaurant. And then leaving before she has a chance or he has a chance to even see it. Start by paying the bill for the guy in back of you in the drive-thru. Start by donating money to a cause that's bigger than you anonymously and without the tax receipt. Start by taking baby steps. No social media, no camera crew, no accolade. Just start taking baby steps and give financially. Again, you're not giving to me financially. You're giving to something else. You want to take a next step? I want to take more of a man-sized step. It's a man step right here. Some of you grew up with this. And you're like, oh, man, that's so natural. Okay, we'll get to you in a second. How about this? There's an old school word, and it means 1/10. Do you know what that word is? It's called a tithe. And this is an ancient Hebrew practice where the people were instructed. This is actually an act of worship to God, not out of religious obligation, but an act of joyful worship to give 1/10 of their money away. It's part of the 80-10-10 principle. Those of you who follow that kind of financial metric, you live on 80%, you invest 10%, you give away 10%. Also part of the 70-15-15, the 60-20-20, the 50-25-25. That percentage can grow. It's fantastic to do. I've experienced it in my own life as this grows. But you want to take another step. It doesn't matter how much money you make, that percentage of giving and living larger is what's important. My parents growing up, we were very, very blue collar. I mean, I feel like that Garth Brooks song, Friends in Low Places, blame it all on my roots, my blue collar roots. Sorry, Garth, I screwed up your song. But you get the point. Very blue collar. Didn't make a lot of money. Very lower middle, I guess, is where we would land. But they gave cheerfully of their money. We would talk about as a family the things we were involved in. We'd have people come over, and these guys are like missionaries in Brazil and in Italy and exotic places like Africa. And we would give locally. We'd have people come over, and they were doing these things, and it was just part of the DNA of our life. A man-sized step for you might be, especially young men who are listening to this, who have been taking your whole life, is to start living like a man, an unentitled man, and start on that giving path of 10%. It's after the baby step, but get there. Next step, grow that percentage annually. I know a guy who does this. Every year he's got his financial summit he does. He meets with this guy, kind of like I meet with my buddy Josh at Edward Jones. We sit down and we walk through this, but this guy does it with his guy. And he takes a look at charts and graphs and all this kind of stuff and where their money's at. And they're being good stewards. They're planning well. I believe you should do that. But guess what else they do? This family, they have a financial summit of not just that kind of stuff, but they have a giving financial summit. And they lay out, this is what we're doing, and the kids talk about it, and they're talking about what we're doing here. And man, we're funding this thing that Musana is doing in Africa and Uganda. And by the way, Andrea and Hareel, hope you're listening to this. Shout out to you guys. But this is a self-sustaining community where they've got hospitals and education centers and schools and all kinds of things that are going on. It's self-sustaining. The only thing there is money for is capital to be able to build, but it's all self-sustaining. Wonderful project. They talk about that. They talk about all the things that they're doing worldwide, and they do it with joy, and they grow that percentage year after year after year after year. And to hear this guy talk about it, not with boasting, not with this is who I am, not with even this is how much tax deduction I get. It's awesome to see the heart of this guy. That's the cure for entitlement, is to live larger than yourself. That's the cure for myopic living, is to take the blinders off and to focus our vision on a life that's bigger than just us, because it's a lonely life to live just for you. The key to this whole thing is to live and give anonymously. Do it with anonymity. Do it in secret. Don't let anybody know about it. Because what will happen is, like the Grinch, your heart will grow 3, 4, 5, 6 sizes that day. It'll be something that begins to break up the soil of your heart so that you can live larger. You can realize the vision for why you get to live this life. You know, Band of Brothers, one of the last episodes, heart-wrenching. It's a story as they landed behind lines in Normandy. They fought the Nazis all the way across Europe. They worked through the Battle of the Bulge. They went through France. They finally got to Germany. There's an episode called Why We Fight. They were in a town in Germany and began to ride into this town, and the people were peaceful enough, and they were on their way to Berlin. They come across one of the most horrifying sights that they'd ever seen. They came across a concentration camp, and they saw these emaciated, skinnier than like my finger, just skin and bones. They saw bodies stacked, mass graves. It captured a sense of horror of what the Nazis were doing to the Jewish people. But the title of the episode was called Why We Fight. Here's the reality of why you need to be a man who's breaking narcissism, breaking entitlement, breaking selfishness, breaking indulgence in your life, because the world around you calls you. It needs you. It's like there are those who are behind fences who are like, if they would just come, if they would just get outside of themselves and help me. Man, the world around you needs you. And you cannot do that if you're stuck inside of a cell called self. My call to action to you is very simple, but very challenging. It's a 7-day challenge. I want you to commit every day for 7 days, do one act of anonymous, generous giving. It could start by 100% tipping. It could start by really large tipping anonymously. It could start by paying the bill for the person in back of you through the drive-thru. It could start by giving money to a cause that you have vetted, because there's some bad ones out there, but vet a good one and say, that's worth our money. 7 days, one each day. And I want you to track the sense of peace that you have in your life. Then I want you to email me, the next stage at Sherpa5280.com, and email me. Just use your first name. Again, I'm not going to say, hey, Mike over on, in Lafayette, boy, he did this. I would just love to hear some stories about how getting outside of yourself, breaking this entitlement part of you, grows you into a man who sees the bigger world around him. Imagine for yourself that kind of life, man. Just imagine this kind of identity where you have become a giver versus a taker. You have become selfless over time. Maybe not all at once, but you become a life giver versus a taker, and you have become sacrificial versus indulgent. The gold nugget for the day that I want to leave you with is this. It's Matthew chapter 6. The teachings of the rabbi Jesus, the greatest teacher of all time, whose moral teaching changed the trajectory of human history. No doubt about it. He said this. He said, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your heavenly Father. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with triumph as the hypocrites do, who gather in the streets and are honored by others. Truly I say, he says, that they've received their reward in full. But you, listen to this, when you give to the needy, don't let your left hand even know what the right hand is doing, so that your giving may be done in secret. Then your heavenly Father, who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Men, what a beautiful life. To be able to break those chains of, look at me, here I am, here's my selfie, here's this, here's my brick on the wall because I gave, here's my logo, here's me, to go, I'm just doing it secretly. Try it. Let me know how it changes your life. Men, thank you for being part of the next stage. I love being able to be the host of this show. Whether we're interviewing somebody or talking about a topic like this, I love it. And I hope it's meant something to you. If it has, if you hate it, don't email me. But if you love it or something's touched your life or you've seen one of those results, email us at thenextstage@sherpa5280.com. Also, if this has meant something with you, if you've gotten something out of this, share the link with a friend. We'd love for you to just spread the word about what's going on with this and how the hearts of men are being enlarged and how we're dealing with things like hard knocks, even the issue of entitlement, and helping us live lives of purpose, power, passion, and perspective. Men, thanks for joining us. We will see you on the next stage on our next episode. We will see you then.